Let me take you back to a time before the MCU. A time where comic book movies were first starting to take off, starting in the early 2000s with Fox's X-Men series, and with films like Sam Raimi's Spider-Man and The Dark Knight being released in the following years. Comic book fans were starting to receive more and more recognition in the film industry, in opposed to just being relegated to their comic books. With all the attention given to characters like Batman and Spider-Man through film media, it seemed only natural that these characters would be adapted into the medium of video games sooner rather than later. In the early 2000s saw the release of several superhero games, most of which acted as movie tie-in games to promote films like Daredevil, Spider-Man 2, and X2. A few of these games, however, were standalone projects. Games such as Aquaman Battle for Atlantis and The Incredible Hulk were released as standalone titles, with no movie to base themselves on. Despite this, these titles were received with mediocre to low reception, with none of these performing particularly well. This all changed when Activision Studios released their X-Men solo game X-Men Legends in 2004. X-Men Legends was released on September 24, 2004. The game was developed by Raven Software and published by Activision Studios for the PlayStation 2, GameCube, and Xbox. The game served as a standalone project despite Fox having released their X-Men films only a few years ago. The game itself played like an action RPG. Players could choose from several different X-Men as they crawled through several maps defeating enemies. Your characters would level up as you progressed through the game, which is the source of the RPG aspect of the game, and the game itself spanned a 15 to 20 hour long campaign including CG cutscenes and a story-based narrative. That being said, I'm not going to go into too much detail about the game's story as a whole, as that's not the focus of today's video. If you guys want me to do a video on the X-Men Legends game itself, let me know and I'll consider it. For now though, all that's important to know is that the game was received really well, causing it to stand out amongst the other mediocre superhero games of its time. It received an 83 and 82% on Games Rating and Metacritic respectively. Both respectable scores to most consumers, and apparently the development team agreed, as the game was seen as popular enough to warrant a sequel, X-Men Legends 2: Rise of Apocalypse. X-Men Legends 2 was released the following year for a wide variety of consoles, including all the same consoles that its predecessor was put on, and the PlayStation Portable, Windows, as well as the Nokia handheld console, the N-Gage. Yeah, I bet you didn't know that was a thing, a Nokia game console. I mean, this thing was both a game player and a cell phone. Take that, Wii phone. This thing was way ahead of its time, but I'm getting off track here. The important thing to know about X-Men Legends 2 is that this game was received just as well as its predecessor, if not even better. The game follows the first game's style of gameplay to a T, and also features a long narrative as well as receiving a large graphical upgrade. All of these factors helped the game sell tons of copies, even making it to the PS2's list of greatest hits. Seeing as how the reception for the first two installments of the series were so positive, fans began to wonder what Raven Software would do next. Would they produce an X-Men Legends 3? Speculation rose, and the questions of fans would finally be answered on October 24, 2006, when Activision released Marvel's Ultimate Alliance on the Xbox, Xbox 360, PlayStation 2, and PlayStation 3. Just like the X-Men Legends games, Ultimate Alliance was produced by Raven Software and followed the same formula that made the X-Men Legends games so great. A narrative story that showed love to the source material and told an interesting tale, a grandiose roster of characters that allowed players to create any teams they wanted, and an entertaining yet simplistic action RPG battle style. The main thing that differentiated Ultimate Alliance from the Legends games, however, was the expansion of the roster to include characters from all across the Marvel Comics universe, rather than just using X-Men characters, as well as the art style changing from a cel-shaded approach towards a more realistic one, making the game look a lot better visually, in my opinion. Characters such as Captain America and Spider-Man were brought into the gameplay style of X-Men Legends for the first time, and oh boy was this great. I suppose this would be a good time as any to start talking about this game with the game's roster. The game presents the player with 17 playable characters at first, with there being an additional 6 characters who are unlocked by either collecting their respective action figures throughout the story, or just advancing in the game's story mode in general. The roster includes returning X-Men Legends characters Wolverine, Colossus, Deadpool, Storm, and Iceman, and adds new characters Captain America, Iron Man, Spider-Man, Thor, Miss Marvel, Mr. Fantastic, Invisible Woman, Human Torch, The Thing, Luke Cage, Moon Knight, Elektra, and Spider-Woman. This game's unlockable characters consisted of Doctor Strange, Blade, Daredevil, Black Panther, Ghost Rider, and Colonel Nick Fury. The roster lineup is really good in my opinion. I love the perfect mix of mainstream characters such as Captain America and Spider-Man, as well as the more obscure picks such as Moon Knight and Deadpool at the time. This game was actually released at about the starting point of Deadpool's popularity, so he was still a relatively niche character. Each character also came with 3 additional costumes, with the exception of Moon Knight, who only had 2 due to being the last character added into development. Each of these costumes would completely change the character's model and sometimes portrays a different character altogether. War Machine, for example, is a costume for Iron Man. Phantom Rider is a costume for Ghost Rider, and Captain America has a costume that turns him into the US agent. However, the roster is not without flaw. There are a few small oddities in it that become more and more strange the further I look into them. None of these are real issues that I have, and I don't think the roster is bad. There's just a few strange choices. One problem in particular I have with the roster is the slim selection of X-Men characters available. I know that Raven Software most likely included the less X-Men due to the fact that they wanted to focus their attention on the non-X-Men heroes who are the focus of the new series. That being said, I think that the selection of X-Men they chose is quite odd. Wolverine makes sense as he's the most iconic member of the X-Men arguably. Storm and Iceman also make a lot of sense as they are both popular and iconic members of the team. And while I like their inclusions, I can't help but find the appearance of Colossus and Deadpool to be strange. I love the way that both of these characters played. I just find it odd that they were included into the game as base roster over key members of the X-Men such as Beast or Cyclops, who's the team leader. This brings us to the second part of the roster, the DLC characters. Ultimate Alliance had 2 waves of DLC, each wave consisting of 4 new playable characters, leading to a total of 8 DLC characters. The first DLC pack was titled the Heroes Pack, and as the name suggests, it consisted of only heroes. The characters included were Hawkeye, Nightcrawler, Hulk, and Cyclops. When I was younger, I always wondered why Hulk was never a playable character in the game, when we got more niche people like Luke Cage. I was never the biggest fan of Hulk. I just found the exclusion odd. I didn't know there was DLC when I was little, so I just didn't know that Hulk existed in the game. Both Hulk and Cyclops were characters that I still feel should have been in the base roster, but while writing this, I do realize that it was likely a good marketing move, because those 2 are pretty big characters and would sell a good amount of units. Looking back at it, the inclusion that confuses me the most of the DLC, however, is none other than Nightcrawler, and I will explain why later when I get into the story analysis. The second and more exciting DLC pack, in my opinion, was labeled the Villains Pack, and included characters Doctor Doom, Magneto, Venom, and Sabretooth. I feel like the characters in this pack all made sense to an extent for the most part. Doctor Doom was the main antagonist of the game's story, so he was obviously a shoo-in. Venom and Magneto are some of the most popular villains of Spider-Man and the X-Men respectively, so they made a ton of sense. The only character choice that seemed strange to me was Sabretooth. In a pack that mostly consisted of Marvel's most iconic villains, Sabretooth was just somewhat of a black sheep. Sure, he's a popular Wolverine villain, but I feel like it would make much more sense to include someone like Green Goblin or Winter Soldier to be included. Sabretooth is just as much fun to play as the rest of the cast in my opinions, so it doesn't really matter. I just find it strange that he of all people got chosen. The PlayStation Portable version of the game added 3 new characters to compensate for the overall smaller roster size. These characters were Maya Lopez, who is the original Ronin, Black Widow, and Captain Marvel. And we are referring to the Genius Vel version of Captain Marvel, who is one of my favorite takes on the character. I just recently found out about these characters upon playing the PSP port of the game, and I found that these characters are all extremely fun to play. Ronin in particular shreds through bosses' health, and it's a shame that these 3 were reserved for the PSP version only, but at least it gives players an incentive to try out the portable version of the game that isn't the nasty-ass Game Boy Advance port. The final thing that I'd like to mention about the roster is the scrapped characters. Apparently, both Samus and Link from the Metroid and Legend of Zelda series, respectively, were planned to be brought in as playable characters for the game's eventual Wii port. Despite this, they were both scrapped before the game was released for unknown reasons. While nothing came of it, I still find it interesting that we almost had a game where Link could fight MODOK and Samus could fight Fin Fang Foom. Now that we've talked about the characters you'll be playing as, I think it's time we dig into how the characters in the game control. Each character in the game has 2 attack buttons, light attack and heavy attack. Pressing light attack allows your character to perform a basic attack, and pressing this button 3 times results in your hero to perform a combo move. Heavy attack is a press and hold move that deals more damage than your light attack when fully charged, but takes time. Players can combine both heavy and light attack buttons to perform combos that can stun, knock down, or launch an enemy. These combo strings are universal and can be performed regardless of what character you choose to play as, although animations are different depending on which character you do them with. You can also grab enemies, and upon grabbing them you can either throw them, pummel them, or perform a unique takedown attack, all of which perform really significant damage to the enemy. Some characters, like Hulk and Thing, have special grabs that let them carry the enemy and swing them around like a weapon, which is pretty fun to do for a few minutes. The basic attacks are only half the fun, though, as each character has 6 to 10 abilities they can use called powers. These powers are used to represent this character's superpowers or superhuman abilities and act as the main way to differentiate characters. Captain America can throw his shield and have it return to him or charge the enemy with it. Spider-Man can fire web blasts or wrap enemies up in his webbing, immobilizing them, and Ghost Rider can use his penance stare to strike fear into the opponents, debuffing them for a period of time. Very few of these powers are duplicates from other characters, and even when they are, they usually have an entirely different animation or appearance to better suit the character that the power belongs to. The final move in a character's arsenal is their extreme attack. These are the ultimate moves of the Ultimate Alliance game, and damage any and all enemies on the screen when used. These moves can only be used when your hero's momentum gauge is filled. The momentum gauge is increased by dealing melee damage to enemies and when taking damage. When a hero performs their extreme attack, it'll begin a chain in which all allies in the Alliance whose momentum gauges are full will be forced to use theirs as well. This can be a bit inconvenient at times, and as of such, the addition of the option to use only one extreme, or the entire team's extremes at a time, was one of the few additions I liked to Ultimate Alliance 3. I say a few because the game completely changed the winning formula of the first 2. However, that video in itself is a whole can of worms that I may do at a later time. In conclusion, the combat of Ultimate Alliance does a good job of representing each individual hero you play well, all the while sharing basic combo strings, and by the end of the game you will most likely just be relying solely on your powers, but the basic attacks are still just as vital as they are an integral part of the game's core mechanics. Sorry about that. The game also has a wide variety of bosses that are well-known characters from the Marvel Universe, such as Scorpion or Ultron. Each level usually possesses one boss at the very end, with several mini-bosses throughout the course of the mission. In the beginning mission alone, you start off fighting Scorpion, Bullseye, Winter Soldier, and the Radioactive Man, all before even reaching the actual boss of the level, Fin Fang Foom. The fact that there are so many unique bosses in the game is one of the aspects that I find this game charming the most. The sheer number of characters who were included into the game was astounding. It was so cool as a kid who grew up reading comic books, being able to recognize characters like Dragon Man, Gladiator, and Atuma on the big screen. Now that I think back on it, I feel like this game gave me more envy than the first time playing it than the MCU did throughout its entire run as of recording this. When talking about the bosses, I like to separate the two types of bosses in the game as damage bosses and puzzle bosses. Damage bosses are the more common of the two and are the traditional boss fight in a video game. You hit them enough until their health drops to 0 and they're defeated. No funny business. Most of the game's mini-bosses are damage bosses, and because of that, they aren't really that hard to deal with. You just hit these guys until they drop and pick up the gear they drop behind, no more, no less. These guys are really just thrown throughout levels to increase the number of villains seen in the game and to add difficulty. Sometimes these bosses have some twist to them, such as Radioactive Man having the ability to make himself invincible for a few seconds at any point, or Curse, who can only be hurt by elemental attacks. Generally, however, these are the simplest bosses in the game, meaning they're relatively easy to defeat while still being fun. The previously mentioned puzzle bosses, however, are usually the final bosses of a specific level. I like to refer to these guys as puzzle bosses because, while they may not be hard most of the time, they usually have some special task you have to do before damaging them. These tasks can range from quick-time events to luring a specific enemy onto a specific platform of the arena so we can damage the boss, I'm not entirely sure whether or not I like the momentum-slowing puzzle bosses or the fast-paced regular ones more, but at the end of the day, there isn't really that big of a difference between these two archetypes. I just like to compare and contrast the two because I personally see them as two different things. The last thing to mention about the game's core gameplay is the fact that the game features a gear and loot system as mentioned earlier. You can acquire gear from defeating bosses throughout the game, and you can equip characters with these pieces of equipment to either boost their stats or give their attacks special properties such as ice or radiation damage. I really like the gear system in this game because almost every piece of gear you acquire is an iconic item of the character you defeated to gain it. You beat Rhino, you get Rhino's horn. You beat Winter Soldier, you get his bionic arm. It's a small touch for sure, but it really shows how passionate the team was about the source material. It's just a neat little thing to have these little trophies of the bosses you've beaten. And with the gear being the last part of the gameplay, I feel like it's needed to be mentioned. It's time to get into the story of the game. As stated earlier, Ultimate Alliance possesses an 18 to 20 hour long story campaign. Because of the length of the game's story, I won't be able to go too deep into the story, but rather I will do my best to summarize it while giving as much information as possible. With that being said, the game opens with a cutscene aboard the SHIELD helicarrier.
What the hell is going on? Where's our air support? Get those forward guns going. Why aren't those rear batteries firing? Somebody get General Wilson on the horn!
Colonel Fury.
Doom, I'll have your head for this.
Our first shot is of Colonel Nick Fury directing his SHIELD forces as he fends off an attack from Dr. Doom. Upon conversing with Doom, he pages Captain America, Thor, Spider-Man, and Wolverine to the helicarrier where they begin to tear through Doom's army of Doombots. I really love this opening cutscene because it does such a good job of showing the personalities of each of the four characters. Captain America shouts orders to the Force while maintaining confidence. Spider-Man cracks jokes while taking up the Doombots. Thor uses his noble demeanor to downsize his opponent, and Wolverine just violently shreds through the robots. Once the team regroups, the cutscene ends and the player gains control of the party for the first time. At this point, the heroes begin to work their way through the helicarrier, defeating Scorpion, who reveals that Dr. Doom has developed a new supervillain team named the Masters of Evil, and that they have big plans that haven't yet been revealed. The heroes defeat him as well as Bullseye, Radioactive Man, and Winter Soldier, and make their way to the main deck of the helicarrier, where they encounter the mystical sky dragon Fin Fang Foom, who is responsible for the helicarrier being knocked out of the sky. The Alliance then battles him, ultimately beating him using an energy cannon on the deck. While the heroes do end up beating Fin Fang Foom, the helicarrier has become too damaged from the attack and cannot be used as a base anymore. Because of this, the Alliance makes their way to Stark Tower, where Tony Stark volunteers to host the heroes. Despite this, there's no time to rest, as Nick Fury has received a distress call from SHIELD agent Dum Dum Dugan, who has been stationed at the Omega Base, a science lab on wheels that is home to many secret projects. The base is en route to crash into a dam while housing several gamma bombs, the same deadly weapons that turned Dr. Bruce Banner into the Incredible Hulk. The team heeds the warning and arrives at the base, where they do meet Dugan. The team escorts him through the base, encountering super soldiers led by Mysterio, Crimson Dynamo, MODOK, and all the forces of AIM. The MODOK boss fight has this really neat gimmick, being that you have to answer trivia questions correctly to be able to advance the fight. Despite all these trials, however, MODOK really proves no issue to the band of metahumans, and they quickly return back to Stark Tower, where they are instantly given their next mission, which comes from the deep trenches of Atlantis. Fury informs our heroes that the Atlantean dictator Attuma has overthrown Namor as the ruler of Atlantis. Knowing that Attuma would wage war upon the surface world, they are immediately sent to a SHIELD outpost along the bordering waters of Atlantis, where they are injected with nanites that would allow them to breathe and speak underwater for a temporary period of time. Almost as soon as they arrive in Atlantean territory, the heroes come across Namor, the true king, being tortured in a pod-like device. Upon freeing him, his cousin Namorita informs the party that Attuma is using neural inhibitors to make the people of Atlantis more violent, explaining why the Atlanteans chose to side with their new dictator. The heroes make their way through Atlantis and defeat Bura and Krang, who are defending the neural inhibitors, and soon discover Attuma and Tiger Shark hiding in Namor's throne room. They are quickly defeated and reveal that they were only able to overthrow Namor with the help of the Iron Man villain, the Mandarin. Hearing this, the party travels into the deepest trenches of Atlantis where they come face to face with the Mandarin, who releases a massive kraken to fight the party before teleporting away. The Kraken is the first quick-time event boss in the game and can sometimes be a pain to fight. Regardless, after defeating the Kraken, our team returns to Stark Tower yet again, preparing to take the fight to Mandarin himself. With the next stop being the Valley of Spirits, home of the Mandarin, the heroes are quickly flown out by their pilot Wyatt Wingfoot, a friend of the Fantastic Four. They arrive and quickly take out the Dragon Man and Ultimo, both of which who are robotic creatures working for the Mandarin. They also encounter the Grey Gargoyle, a reoccurring Thor villain who has the unique ability to transform anything he touches into stone. This stony villain intimidates the team at first, but they quickly defeat him. They then meet with Doctor Strange, who has lost his mystical Eye of Agamotto in the Mandarin's castle. He is assisted by the heroes, and after finding his precious relic, leaves the rest of the team to their own affairs, leaving only the party and the Mandarin left in the Valley of Spirits, where they encounter him in his throne room. Mandarin puts up a tough fight, even going so far as to hide behind his army of robots like a coward, leading to this being the most tedious boss fight in the game. But when he is eventually defeated, Mandarin drops the bombshell that he was never part of the Masters of Evil, meaning that whoever was in Atlantis wasn't him. Following this, the Mandarin speculates that the person the Alliance encountered in Atlantis was none other than Loki, the trickster god who is in league with Doctor Doom himself. Right after sharing this tidbit, Mandarin teleports away, never to be seen in the game again. Shortly arriving back at Stark Tower, Nick Fury informs the team of two important tidbits of information. That A, Doctor Doom has supposedly kidnapped the X-Man Nightcrawler, and B, that Doctor Strange, after receiving help in the Valley of Spirits, is willing to let the team use his Sanctum Sanctorum as a new base. Our heroes are flown out to their new headquarters and are told by Stephen Strange that they believe they have found the location of Doctor Doom. Upon hearing this, the team travel to what they believe to be Doom's castle, using an ancient relic known as the Orb of Teleportation. The party arrives at the supposed castle of Doom, but things seem weird upon entrance. Posters of Doom himself are vandalized with clown wigs and noses, and as the team progresses through the corridors of the castle, they eventually cross paths with none other than the X-Man Jean Grey. She appears to be brainwashed as she begins to attack the team, and upon being defeated, it's revealed that the castle doesn't actually belong to Doctor Doom, but rather is a part of the Death Trap murder world built by Arcade to lure victims in, leading to their deaths. The team pursues Jean deeper and deeper into Murder World, eventually being able to free the young telepath of her mind control. Their focus is then turned towards Arcade, who puts supervillains Rhino and Shocker between himself and the heroes. The team even finds Blade, the half-vampire monster hunter trapped in an arcade machine, who joins the heroes upon being freed. Eventually, the team does reach Arcade, who fights back using a large robot, and despite the size of the robot, he's defeated quite easily, and the team takes their leave only to find out that while they were dealing with Arcade, the real Doctor Doom has used Nightcrawler's teleportation powers to warp himself into Mephisto's realm, the Marvel Universe equivalent of Hell. Hearing this, the team quickly arrives in Mephisto's realm, where they are attacked by waves of demons. Jean Grey is sent by Professor X to assist the team as they work their way towards Mephisto and his son Blackheart. This all goes well until the team learns that while they were fighting their way to the two Hellions, Jean Grey was attacked by Blackheart, and they do not know where she has gone or if she's even alive. They even find Ghost Rider along the way, who joins the team after hearing that they plan to take down Mephisto. When they do finally find Blackheart, he presents the heroes with a choice. Both Jean Grey and Nightcrawler have been locked into two cages above the Infinity Vortex, where their souls would fall for eternity. Blackheart tells the heroes that they can save one of the X-Men. Whichever one they choose not to save will fall into the vortex. The team chooses whichever X-Men they wish to save and then force onward to defeat Mephisto himself. Before I go any further, I'd like to refer back to when I mentioned earlier that I have a problem with Nightcrawler being playable at the game. Alright, the fact that you can play as Nightcrawler would make you believe that Nightcrawler being the one to survive Mephisto's realm would be the canon route. Despite this, Jean Grey is a playable character in the game's sequel, and this just makes the whole scenario where one lives, one dies feels more strange than emotional. Despite this, it's really nothing too distracting or game-breaking, as in the base game you would have no way of knowing that one was playable while the other wasn't. Regardless, when the heroes do reach the Spulcher, where Mephisto is hiding, they struggle to defeat him until Mephisto resurrects the X-Men who wasn't saved in the Inferno, and uses them as a puppet. Eventually, the brainwashed X-Warrior regains free will and chooses to sacrifice themselves to defeat Mephisto, allowing the heroes to escape at the cost of their own life. While all the heroes were in Hell, Doom had begun his raid on Asgard, the world of the Norse gods, home of Thor and Loki, using the super soldiers he acquired back when he worked with MODOK to raid the Omega Base. Doom and the remaining Masters of Evil have managed to imprison the Norse gods, leaving Asgard defenseless. Due to this, Valkyrie calls upon the Alliance to help the situation in Asgard, with their first priority being to reactivate the Bifrost Bridge, the rainbow teleporter that allows interrealm travel. The villains guarding the Bifrost are none other than the Wrecking Crew, a group of villains who regularly fight Thor and the Defenders. They don't prove much of an issue to the heroes, and the team is able to reboot the Bifrost Bridge pretty easily. With the bridge being fixed, the only affair left in Asgard is for the heroes to figure out what exactly happened to the Asgardian gods. The Force heads to Valhalla, the paradise for deceased souls of brave warriors, where they find Heimdall, Baldur, and Tyr, who are all being held hostage by Shocker, Rhino, Scorpion, and the Lizard. The team frees Tyr and Baldur from their peril, but before they can release Baldur, the Enchantress and her servant, the Executioner, show up in an attempt to stop the heroes. Baldur is then released, and the heroes realize that Odin is unaccounted for. Upon this realization, they leave for Niflheim, home of the Frost Giants, where they hope to find Odin. The team defeats Ymir, king of the Frost Giants, but all they can find is a shattered Twilight Sword, the ancient blade of Odin himself. Hurrying, the team arrives at Raven Peak, where they find Ultron, Baron Mordo, and Loki, who are all defeated by the team. The team also takes the Destroyer Armor, an ancient sentient armor set that has immense power, and are told by Nick Fury to activate it. Upon activating it, however, it's revealed that Nick Fury was actually Loki the whole time, trying to activate the Destroyer Armor. The heroes use the power of the armor against Loki and defeat him, leaving Doctor Doom himself as the only Master of Evil left standing. Celebration of victory doesn't last long, though, as Doctor Doom appears immediately after Loki is defeated. He has succeeded in his quest to obtain the powers of Odin, meaning that he has obtained the power of the strongest god in the universe. The heroes stand no chance against him, and all seems lost, when at the last second, Uatu the Watcher appears just as Doctor Doom is about to kill our heroes. Uatu teleports the team to Attilan, the moon-based capital of the Inhumans, which is safe from Doom's reach for the time being. Uatu is a being whose sole purpose is to watch the natural progression of history without ever interfering. However, seeing as how his precious humans were about to be killed, he broke the sacred rule of the Watchers. Uatu's vast knowledge comes in handy, however, as he informs the team that Doom has become the strongest mortal in the universe, but not all hope is lost. There is a device that can be assembled to drain Doom of Odin's power using two very powerful energy sources, the Makran Crystal and the Muonic Inducer of Galactus, one of the strongest beings in the universe. Having no time to wait, the heroes use the Inhuman Canine Lockjaw to teleport to the Shi'ar Empire, where they meet up with Corsair, a more obscure Marvel character who's actually the father of the X-Men Cyclops, Havoc, and Vulcan. Corsair informs the team that Lilandra, the peaceful leader of the Shi'ar, has been overthrown and replaced by Deathbird, her war-loving sister. Needing the crystal, however, the team forces their way into the main deck of the ship, where they find and defeat Deathbird. Having lost, Deathbird begins a self-destruct sequence of the ship, causing the heroes to hurry and attempt to disarm it, which they eventually do, but depending on the player's actions, Lilandra may die as well. Regardless of the outcome of Lilandra, the heroes take a shard of the crystal and go to the Skrull homeworld, where they learn Galactus is currently feasting. As soon as the heroes arrive on the Skrull homeworld, they encounter the residents fleeing for their lives as a powerful being destroys and feeds on their planet. The heroes even discover the Skrull Queen herself, who offers to help the team if they help her escape the planet before it's fully consumed, but upon helping her, the Alliance learn that it was all a lie and are forced to fight Pybox, Super Skrull, and Titanus, all before even attempting to fight the all-powerful Galactus. The team flees from Galactus until they encounter none other than the Silver Surfer, who tells them that he can help them defeat Galactus if they are able to disarm his shields, which they are able to do, leading to the seeming defeat of the Planet Eater. With all the fights done and their powerful conductors in hand, the team is quickly teleported back to Earth, where they are informed by Uatu that in their absence, Dr. Doom has killed many heroes who stayed on Earth, including several X-Men. They also learn that Doom has somehow learned how to make evil copies of the heroes he has fought, leading to him making an army with the faces and powers of all of his greatest foes. After all the build-up and preparation, the team arrives at Castle Doom, which has been changed by Doom's new godly power. Things move by themselves, doorways lead to other doorways, falling off platforms flips the world upside down, and so much more. The team is forced to clash with evil copies of some of the closest members in their ranks, such as Captain America, Spider-Man, Thor, and Cyclops, before reaching Doom's throne room, where he is guarded by evil replicas of his greatest foes, the Fantastic Four. These fakers are no match for the real heroes, however, and Doom prepares to fight the heroes himself when suddenly his power is drained using the device assembled from the conductors they acquired in space. Doom's god power is siphoned and given to the team. Doom and the heroes are now on an equal playing field, and although the fight is long and hard, the heroes eventually reign supreme, and when all seems lost for Doom, a bolt of lightning strikes him down, and Odin's voice can be heard telling Doom that an eternity of suffering awaits he who surpassed the gods. With Doom defeated, Nick Fury assembles the Ultimate Alliance one final time on the rebuilt helicarrier. He informs them that the team must be disbanded, which upsets many members of the team. Everyone leaves the room except for Captain America, who Fury asks if he can call on the Alliance again if things ever go south, to which Captain America responds with what is one of my favorite lines in video game and comic history to this day.
The world can count on us, sir.
Overall, this game is really great. As a kid, this is the game that got me into playing video games as a whole. Ultimate Alliance really is, there's never going to be another Marvel game like it. The MCU may be around, but this was a product of love. It was created by comic book nerds for comic book nerds before the MCU made it big. This is my first attempt on doing a game discussion like this. I know I stuttered a few times, so I'm sorry about that. I'll try. I'm probably going to... Actually, let me know if you guys would be interested in me doing an Ultimate Alliance 2 video. I'd love to compare what I think 2 does better than the original, and discuss several of the problems I have with 2. And then I know at some point I do want to do a 3 video, because 3 is a whole can of worms that I don't want to get into. Just in this video alone, I mean. But, Ultimate Alliance, it's a great game. It's hard to come across these days, 'cause Activision lost the license to make Marvel games. I should have mentioned this earlier, but they were also behind iconic Marvel games of the 2000s, like Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions, Spider-Man Edge of Time. They made all of the X-Men tie-in games. Activision published a lot of good Marvel games, and it's a shame that they've lost the license. But thank you for tuning in today, and I hope to see you all in a future game discussion. This has been Cobra Mai, and I want you to keep on reading comic books.